Welcome back. Well, Donald Trump's narrative is that he's a self-made Superman who's smarter and better educated than everybody else. But a new book from his own niece suggests what everyone but his base has already figured out. He's a fraud. In Mary Trump's new book, she accuses him of being a cheater as far back as high school. Quote, aware of the Wharton School's reputation, Donald Trump set his sights on the University of Pennsylvania. Unfortunately, even though his sister Marianne had been doing his homework for him, she couldn't take his tests. And Donald worried that his grade point average, which put him far from the top of the class, would scuttle his efforts to get accepted. To hedge his bets, he enlisted Joe Shapiro, a smart kid with a reputation for being a good test taker, to take his SATs for him. Mary Trump also portrays her uncle as a traumatized rich kid with daddy issues, calling him a clinical narcissist. I'm joined now by Tony Schwartz, who co-authored Trump's Art of the Deal. And Tony, this is pretty blockbuster because no one knows you like your own family. And let me read you one of the claims that Mary Trump makes in this book that's not come out yet, but it's leaking. His personality, and it says here that he is a sociopath, according to her, and she's a clinical psychologist. His personality served his father's purpose. That's what sociopaths do. They co-opt others and use them toward their own ends, ruthlessly and efficiently, with no tolerance or dissent for dissent or resistance. By limiting Donald's access to his own feelings and rendering many of them unacceptable, Fred perverted his son's perception of the world and damaged his ability to live in it. She's basically saying both the dad and Donald are sociopaths. You met the father. Is that your experience?
Well, by the time I met Fred Sr., he was pretty far down the road with Alzheimer's. So I didn't have the experience of him, that experience of him, but I got it from Donald himself. He often acknowledged to me that his father was rough and tough and abusive and difficult. He wouldn't have used the word abusive because he wouldn't have been comfortable saying that, but it was the impression that I certainly took away. And it really is a long lineage because his grandfather, who, illegally tried to leave, Germany twice or go back to Germany, was himself a pretty questionable human being.
Yeah. I think he might have been involved in some form of prostitution, I believe, in Alaska. They have an interesting lineage. Did he ever talk about the Klan thing, that the father attended a Klan rally? Well, we'll move on. Here is Mary Trump claiming that her... he did not talk about that. Okay. Got the answer to that. All right. Mary Trump also claims that her aunt, Marianne Trump, called Donald Trump a clown and didn't think that he could get elected. Here's that little bit. He's a clown, my Aunt Marianne said during our regular lunches at the time. This will never happen, I agreed. We talked about how his reputation as a faded reality star and failed businessman would doom his run. Does anyone even believe this bull S, that he's a self-made man? What has he ever accomplished on his own, I asked. Well, Marianne said, as dry as the Sahara, he had 5 bankruptcies, ... I mean, he was the thing. How would somebody like Donald Trump, and I know it was partly through the book that he wrote with you, trick so many people into believing that he was a good businessman when he was so bad at business?
It's back to psychopathy or sociopathy. They are really interchangeable, Joy. So essentially the same diagnosis. And a sociopath has no conscience and has no empathy. That's Trump. And as a consequence, he could say anything and do anything. His psychopathy made it possible for him to tell a story over and over again that wasn't true without any guilt or shame until essentially it's like Humpty Dumpty. Humpty Dumpty, you keep pushing and pushing and pushing, and finally, we're seeing him start to go down. I really do see what they would call in psychology a decompensation over the last 2 months with Trump. He's lost his political instincts. He's lost his sense of what will play even for his base, or certainly for anybody who's on the fringe of his base. So I think Mary Trump is one more nail in the coffin.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about what Donald Trump is doing now is that he as you said, the things that he thinks will play, he's assuming that with white voters, all you have to do is just dangle lots and lots of racism and hate in front of them. It's a horrible thing to think about your own supporters, that you think that all they care about is reconstructing the antebellum South and, you know, going back to the slavery era. And I mean, it's a terrible thing he thinks about the people, you know, who support him, because he assumes they're all racist, I guess.
He has one gear, Joy, and that gear is to arouse fear. And if it doesn't seem to work, then he pushes it harder. And that's what he's doing right now. He is hammering harder on something, even though it is no longer in his interest to do so. So I think, I think we're seeing a Trump for whom the world, the lifetime of lies and inventions and fictions and hideous behavior is finally catching up.
Yeah.
It's called karma. It just took a long time to happen for him.
Do you believe the cheating story?
Oh, of course. I mean, as I said, of course. As I said today, there is no chance that Donald Trump could have gotten into a decent 4-year college without his father's money and having somebody else take his SATs.
There you go.
Because he is the most important thing to understand. We don't know about what his IQ is.
Yeah.
But what we do know is incapable of paying attention. And as a result, he is ignorant. Yeah. So he couldn't.
And lastly,
couldn't comport himself in a good way. Yeah.
Lastly, before we go, Stephanie Winston Wolkoff, who was was a first lady, loyal confidant to the first lady, supposedly also writing a book. Donald Trump demands loyalty. That's what he wants the most. He's getting a weird kind of loyalty from Republicans because they're afraid to. But behind the scenes, they're all talking about him. They're all trashing him behind the scenes. Is there anyone in his life who actually is loyal to him?
Well, yes. The 3 or 4 hostages that he has, whose names are Donald, Ivanka, Eric, and perhaps one of the other 2 kids, who don't want to lose what they think is their father's love, they are loyal to him because they have to be. Yeah. But they know absolutely as well as you and I do that this is a very, very bad man. Yeah. Fascinating stuff. Tony Schwartz, thank you so much for helping us unpack it. Really appreciate always you being here.